Today is October the 28th. Today, we learn what it means to be thankful from the book of Philippians. Reading through the Bible in a year today, I'd like you to read the book of Philippians. Again, a short book, less than 10 minutes of reading. Now, in the book of Philippians, one of the things that stands out is Paul repeatedly comes back and says, be thankful, rejoice, count it all joy, have great joy. I have great joy. You have great joy. Paul talks a lot about thankfulness. In the book of Philippians, he tells us what the keys to thankfulness are. In chapter 1, he explains a little bit about his own life, but then in chapter 2, he comes to the crucial point. In verses 1 through 4, he says, the key to living a successful life is to not focus on yourself, rather to focus on others. Look at what he says in chapter 2, verse 4. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others as well. Some of the translations are a little bit better than the New Living Translation. They don't say, don't look out only for your own interests. They simply say, don't focus on self-interest. Be interested in others. That's actually what Paul is saying. Lose your self-interest. Focus on others. Then he gives 4 examples in chapter 2. The first example is Christ, who left the glory of heaven to come to earth, live as a servant, and die on a cross. Then he presents himself as an example. And Paul, in this section, from verses 12 to 18 of chapter 2, says, I pour myself out as a drink offering for you. Then he talks about Timothy, and look at what he says about Timothy. He says in chapter 2, verse 20, I have no one else like Timothy who genuinely cares about your welfare. And then he finishes talking about Epaphroditus. Epaphroditus came to Paul from the Philippian church. He brought with him a gift, a monetary gift from the Philippian church. Part of what Paul is doing, this is a thank you letter. But another part of what Paul is doing here is he's commending Epaphroditus. After Epaphroditus delivered the letter and the gift from the Philippian church, he stayed with Paul. He worked with Paul. He did what Paul asked him to do, and he became ill. He almost died. Now, of Epaphroditus, he says, when Epaphroditus heard that you had learned that he was sick, he then began to worry about you. He worried that you would blame yourself for having sent him. He was concerned about your interest. Chapters 1 and 2 are the first key to living a life of thankfulness. Focus on others. In chapter 3, a second key is mentioned. Persevere. There will be times when it's tough. Paul says, press on. He says, press on in verse 12. I don't mean to say that I've already achieved these things or that I've already reached perfection, but I press on to possess that perfection for which Christ Jesus first possessed me. And then 2 verses later in verse 14, I press on to reach the end of the race. Second key to being thankful is to stick with it. Press on. Persevere. Now in chapter 4, there are specific cases that Paul mentions. I love verse 2. Now I appeal to Euodia and Syntyche, please, because you belong to the Lord, settle your disagreement. How would you like to be remembered throughout church history as two bickering women, two who had a disagreement? Paul calls you out and he says, settle it. Well, I hope they did. Certainly. What Paul is saying to us is, if you have a disagreement, don't just let it lie. Go fix it. A third key to being thankful is to learn to take care of the small things that might create in us resentment. At the end of the letter, Paul says, hey, rejoice, rejoice. I count it all joy. You too, count it all joy. God has supplied all of our needs. We can be thankful in Him. Like, follow, and subscribe to this devotional on whatever platform you use to listen to it. Email your questions to us at questions@becomehope.com. Enjoy this Sunday in the church of your choice.